So let's talk about the autonomic nervous system. This, I believe, is, well, for myself, I think, and I'm OBGYN, but I think this is probably the most important chapter you'll probably have to deal with in all of A&P 1 and 2. There's so much to know about this. I'm very fascinated by it. There is some memory to it, but there's a lot of common sense to it also. The bear is going to be chasing you, and that's why I put a bear there. That's why I'm wearing a bear tie. But if a bear is chasing you, what would you expect your heart rate to do? What would you expect your blood flow to your stomach to do? What would you expect your pupils in your eyes to do? A lot of it is common sense. Now, with that said, please, I think a lot of people feel, students feel it's so common sense that they don't put the time to put any kind of studying in it, and they spend more time on the other issues that'll be on the next exam. And that's where I find students falling. They would leave the exam, leave the testing site, and they would say, we did study Superman, but we didn't put that much time in this because we were thinking it was a little bit more common sense. And it is, but there is some memory stuff to it too. So don't want to mislead you about the word common sense, but it's also very enjoyable. You'll also use this if you're going to be taking pharmacology. About 60% of our medications that are out there are all based on the autonomic nervous system. So, so that's just giving you a heads up, a little bit of introduction of why this is so significant about the autonomic nervous system. So I picked obviously the bear over here, and this is probably what you're going to be doing right after A&P in a few weeks. All right, you just will find a place and just crash right there, and that's totally fine. All right, so let's talk about the autonomic nervous system. So we're going to be looking at this wonderful slide over here, and we're going to be dealing with the efferent version, or the efferent division, where it's stuff that's going to be happening involuntarily. Things that it's going to control is cardiac muscle, smooth muscle. Keep in mind where smooth muscle is. It's around your intestines, it's around the blood vessels, around the uterus, the urinary bladder, and so forth. So they're going to have control about that. You don't control that. It's also going to control glands and the lungs too. All right. So there's two parts to it: the sympathetic, or known as the fight or flight, the bear, or the parasympathetic, or the rest and digest. Some students like to refer to the parasympathetic as paradise, and in essence, it is a little bit of resting. So again, you've seen this before. You've seen this before. All right, just keep this in mind as you go through each chapter. All right, this picture is a little bit different because it's dealing with the autonomic nervous system. And if you see something here, it goes to the brain. It could, you want to see something like a glass of water. Your brain interprets what muscles to contract and sends motor down there into the skeletal muscle to move them. But we could also deal with the autonomic nervous system, which is on this side. And maybe food goes down into the stomach, the stretch receptors in the stomach kick on, you got the stretching going on, and that sends a message to the brain, and the brain says, okay, I'm going to go to the glands and start secreting things so we can break up the food that's making the stomach stretch. All right, you have no control about that. That's what happens. Now you can mix and mingle these things because you could smell, and you're aware of that. So you could have your five senses. You could smell pizza. So that's something you're conscious about. But then all of a sudden it goes up to your brain, and the brain says, oh, you're going to put food in your mouth. So it starts kicking on your salivary glands, which you have no control about. You start salivating. So you could have the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system working together. Okay? Okay, here we go. The autonomic nervous system. Basically, it's involuntary movements, as I just explained, mostly dealing with the internal or the visceral organs. It will innervate the smooth muscle, heart, and glands. Okay? And it's mainly regulated by the hypothalamus. Okay? It's really the supervisor. Hypothalamus is not going to make the heart rate go up. It's going to say, give permission. Okay, autonomic nervous system, you could do whatever you need to do so that we can make the body adjust to that bear chasing you. So hypothalamus is the main supervisor of the autonomic nervous system. So, somatic versus the autonomic nervous system. What we've learned before was the pathway to, let's say, going right to the skeletal muscle, the somatic. And what we did was that we had one nerve that would go out to a muscle. This would be in the central nervous system, right? But that's it. We only have one synapse here, so we have one neurotransmitter. So that's our somatic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system, a little bit different. In this case, we have a neuron there, but then you're going to have another neuron here going to some effector organ, some target. It won't be skeletal muscle. It will be cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, glands. This will be in our spinal cord. And the cell body of this first neuron will be located in our lateral great horn. So in essence, is here. Then it's going to synapse with another neuron over here. And it synapses in a ganglion. Somewhere outside the central nervous system. This here, the first neuron, first order neuron, so to say, is what we call the pre-ganglionic neuron. Because it happens before it starts and goes to the ganglion. So it actually happens before the ganglion. So you can imagine that this one over here is the post-ganglionic neuron. Okay? So we have two neurons in the autonomic nervous system. We have two synapses in the autonomic nervous system. And therefore, we have receptors here and receptors here. We're going to talk about them. Now we're going to talk about different types of receptors. And we're also going to see neurotransmitters happening over here and neurotransmitters happening over here. And those are maybe two different types of neurotransmitters, which we'll get into. So as you saw before with the neuromuscular junction, through botulism and black widow spider, we can control, or at least we have the opportunity where we can increase the amount of acetylcholine, we could block receptors, we could decrease the amount of acetylcholine going across. And when I say acetylcholine, I'm talking about neurotransmitters. Same way here, we could have more neurotransmitters get released, less, we could block the receptors. So this is where medications all come in. And it's about 60% of our medications that are out there are based on this. So just what I drew for you, right here, okay? I do a lot more art therapy, but if you miss class or whatever, it's right there. All right, now, well, same thing. So there's what I drew up on top. Just one neuron for the somatic nervous system, and you've got this one synapse. Over here, you have a synapse at the ganglion, and we have a synapse someplace out further. We have neurotransmitters here, you have receptors here, and we got receptors here. And there are two different types of receptors. Well, more than two, but okay. Now, the autonomic nervous system anatomy. Like I said, the preganglionic fiber is our first order neuron when we're dealing with that. All right, the cell body's in the central nervous system, and the neuron goes to the autonomic ganglion. The postganglionic fiber, its cell bodies will be found in the autonomic ganglion, and then will go to some kind of effector organ, whatever that is. Cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, glands, so to say. Okay, just showing you what's happening there. Now, the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. For the most part, I would say, and I'm guessing on this, about 90% of cases, they work opposite of each other. Okay? Sometimes it'll just work by itself and doesn't need the other division, or they actually work together. For most cases, they have opposite effects, antagonistic effects. All right, and we have the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic. This is what we're going to get into. Now, some few things over here, some features that we'll talk about later too, but I want you to see what's going on here. Here's the sympathetic nervous system. And there's the spinal cord, there's the brain, the spinal cord. We're going to have in red on this picture is the preganglionic fibers. And in essence, in the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic fibers, the red, is very short. And synapses with this chain that we kind of introduced to you last week. But when it synapses with the postganglionic fiber in its ganglion, the postganglionic fibers in blue are very long. Okay? So short preganglionic and long postganglionic. Let's look at the parasympathetics. The parasympathetics are very long preganglionic fibers. See in red. And the blue, you almost sometimes don't even see it because they're so short. The postganglionic fibers in the parasympathetic nervous system are very short. Sometimes the organ is right next to the ganglion, or the ganglion is right in the organ itself. Another feature I want you to see between the two of these. In the sympathetic nervous system, everything really comes from the thoracic area and the lumbar area. So sometimes we will refer this to the sympathetic nervous system as the thoracolumbar division. How do they get to the other places? Well, that's where it's going to stretch out their pre-ganglion fibers or post-ganglion fibers and stretch out to those other areas that they're not coming out of. Okay? So sympathetic is known as the thoracolumbar region or division. Over here, in the parasympathetic, it's coming from our head, the brain area, or the sacral area. So the parasympathetic is also referred to as the cranial sacral division. And if you remember about good old vagus nerve, the vagus nerve is carrying 70% of parasympathetics to the, carrying 70%, but they're carrying them to the thoracic and abdominal cavities. And that's what you're seeing this vagus nerve doing. And that's how it fills in the rest over here. Okay? So again, just to reiterate, the sympathetic nervous system, short preganglionic fibers, long postganglionic fibers. The parasympathetic have long preganglionic fibers and short postganglionic fibers. And the sympathetic, they have, it comes from the thoracolumbar area, thus the name sympathetic can be known as the thoracolumbar division. And this parasympathetics, its innervation comes from the brain and sacral area, so the parasympathetic is also referred to as the cranial sacral division. All right, just anatomy, very simple anatomy. Questions so far? Okay. So let's talk about the sympathetic nervous system. And then we'll go to parasympathetic, and then we'll give you guys a little break. All right. Sympathetic nervous system, also referred to as the thoracolumbar division. It's the fight or flight. When a bear's chasing you, taking one of my exams, that kind of thing. Okay? During danger, stress, anxiety. The neurotransmitters to the target organs, its major neurotransmitter is going to be norepinephrine. Okay? We abbreviate with NE. In some cases, we also have epinephrine, which goes to the adrenal gland, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. And in rare occasions, but we'll talk about that, is acetylcholine. Here's just some functions, but it makes sense. A bear's chasing you. You would expect your heart rate to go up. You would expect the blood pressure to go up. So you're going to have the smooth muscle around the blood vessels contract and will constrict those blood vessels to get the blood pressure up. Air in the bronchioles, well, they will dilate. Actually, I did that mistake on purpose. As I mentioned to you before, don't get bronchodilation and vasodilation meaning the same thing. Vasodilation means that the blood vessels, vaso means vessels, blood vessels. That's going to, if we say vasodilate, the blood vessels dilate. If we say vasoconstrict, the blood vessels will constrict. Bronchodilation and bronchoconstriction is dealing with the lungs. Okay? So don't get the two mixed up. I think students, when they take exams, you see the word constriction and they don't see the prefix of that word and they get things wrong. So do make sure you see the differences. It's also going to, and you would expect for a bear chasing you, you want your bronchioles to dilate, to get more oxygen into your lungs to get the heck out of there, right? It also dilate the pupils of your eyes. If a bear is chasing you, you want your pupils to open up to allow more sunlight to come in so you can see the whole field and see where should I run to, all right? It makes sense is what I'm saying, okay? So these are just some functions. We'll get more into them later. All right, the two ganglion in the sympathetic nervous system. We have the sympathetic chain ganglia. I introduced that to you before, but we'll show you this again. There are two chains that go down on either side of the vertebral column. Okay? They're very close or next to the vertebral column, so we say it's also the paravertebral ganglion. Para means next to. Next to what? The vertebral column. So again, the cell bodies of these, of the preganglion fibers, will be in the lateral horns of the thoracolumbar area. We also have the collateral ganglia. Now I'm going to show you pictures, it'll make sense. I'm just defining them on the slide here. The collateral ganglion, these will be found in front of or anterior to the vertebral column. Not on the sides, in front of. That's why we call it the prevertebral, because it's found in front of, pre. The only thing is, there's an aorta there, and it's in front of the aorta, or anterior to the aorta. Some preganglionic fibers will synapse here instead of the sympathetic chain. And these will send postganglionic fibers, if they go to the collateral ganglion, they'll send them to the abdominal pelvic organs. So, what's happening here, this is the collateral ganglia. There's three of them, the celiac ganglion, the superior mesenteric ganglion, and the inferior mesenteric ganglion. I know it looks very busy over here, but you can see this blood vessel. That's the aorta. This is your diaphragm up here. Here's your two kidneys. Okay? The aorta comes down and splits into two. Where the splitting is right where your belly button is. All right? It's not low into the pelvic area. It's right where your belly button is. So that's your aorta right here. These areas, or these ganglia, will be found anterior to the aorta. The celiac ganglion is over here. The superior mesenteric ganglion is over here, and the inferior mesenteric ganglion is over here. Keep alert and try not to forget these words: celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric. You're going to see them again in anatomy and physiology when you learn about blood vessels and giving blood supply to the abdominal organs. You have the celiac artery, the superior mesenteric artery, and inferior mesenteric artery. So that'll come back to you again later on. So again, in the sympathetics, you will have short preganglionic fibers and long postganglionic fibers. Here's the exception, the adrenal gland, also known as the suprarenal gland because of where it's located on top of the kidney, or superior to the kidney. This has preganglionic fibers going from the lateral horn of the spinal cord and will go all the way down to the adrenal gland. There is no postganglionic fiber when we're dealing with the adrenal gland. It enters the inner core of the adrenal gland called the adrenal medulla. There's an outer cortex that releases hormones, and you'll learn about those in A&P2 with endocrinology. But we're talking about going into the adrenal medulla, the inner core. And once the preganglion fibers go and synapse to the cells that make epinephrine, norepinephrine in the inner core, this medulla, they will release them directly into the bloodstream. So in essence, epinephrine and norepinephrine in this case, they're neurotransmitters because they're getting released from the presynaptic membrane of the neuron, but they don't go to a receptor like normal neurotransmitters. Instead, they go directly into the bloodstream. So because of that, epinephrine, norepinephrine in this case are hormones. So they're hormones slash neurotransmitters when we're dealing with the adrenal glands. It's got features of both. All right, now, just showing you on this is the sympathetic nervous system. It's a different picture than before. They're showing you here in green, so now it's a different photo. In green, they're showing the preganglionic fibers starting from the the thoracolumbar area of the spinal cord, and it goes into this sympathetic chain on either side. It may synapse there, it may go right through there and go to the collateral ganglion. I'll show you the fates of these in a moment. If it does synapse over here, then it's going to go synapse to a very long, in red here, long postganglionic fibers. Here's the adrenal gland above the kidney. You can follow the green is going to go through here, which is the preganglionic fiber. It goes this way and it synapses with the adrenal gland. There is no postganglionic fiber when we're dealing with the adrenal medulla. Okay? So you saw this picture before. Now we can build with it. You know our wonderful spinal cord, dorsal root, ventral root. Dorsal root ganglion, no such thing as a ventral root ganglion. Here's your spinal nerve, this area right here. There's your dorsal ramus, ventral ramus. But now we can concentrate on this. You have two communicating rami that lead to our sympathetic chain that we've been talking about. From there, the nerve will go out, and that's what we call the autonomic nerve. Same way here. There's the body of our vertebra, spinal cord. There's our communicating rami. And right there on either side of the body, or the centrum of the vertebra, is going to be our sympathetic ganglion. Paravertebral, down on next to the vertebral column. You can appreciate here, there's a communicating rami, and that's the sympathetic ganglion. But it's connected to the one below it and the one above it. So it becomes more of a chain. And that's why we call this the sympathetic chain ganglion. Okay? So we could have nerves, when they enter here, they could go up or down. Okay? And it's kind of showing it similar things. If this is the collateral ganglion, it may, this preganglionic fiber can pass right through the sympathetic chain and could synapse in a collateral ganglion instead of the sympathetic chain. All right? It can get pretty busy, but it can go up and down because it's a chain. So let's talk about that. There's 3 different pathways. Pretty easy to manage. I'm going to tell you them in words over here, but the pitch will be worth 1,000 words. 3 different pathways that the preganglionic neurons take for sympathetic nervous system. They can enter the chain and immediately synapse right there with a postganglionic fiber. That's a possibility. Or they can enter the sympathetic ganglion chain and travel up 1 or 2 ganglion or down lower 2 ganglion and synapse there. Or it could pass right through that sympathetic chain and go to the collateral ganglion. Okay? And I'll explain about this divergence in a moment. But let's talk about what these 3 are. And these numbers here, 1, 2, 3, follow the 1, 2, 3 on here. So they start off in the lateral gray horn over here. There's the cell bodies. There's a sympathetic chain, or the sympathetic ganglion. It can immediately synapse with a postganglionic, the red here, and go out that way. Or it can enter the sympathetic chain and go up or down and synapse with a postganglionic, those levels. Or it can pass right through here and synapse in a collateral ganglion that's further on. All right? It's not too bad. It's all anatomy. Okay? Now, the only thing I want to go back to here for is this neuronal divergence. You could have this happening. The preganglionic fiber synapses in the ganglion over here, or the collateral, or sympathetic, or the chain. And what happens here is that it can actually do this. It diverges. So one preganglionic fiber can stimulate 3 or 20 or 50 different postganglion fibers at the same time. So if this gets stimulated, it happens very quickly that it's going to affect all these different organs. I mean, this could be, and I'm just giving you examples, this could be your heart, this could be your lungs, this could be your skeletal muscles of your leg. Sorry, it's a fast leg and foot. Okay. But it happens quickly. It's got this widespread effect. Okay? And this is where you got to keep your mind here, is that we have a neurotransmitter over here, we have a different one over here, a different one over here, a different one over here. But if we do something that's going to block this, then these will all be affected. I want to slow down your heart rate, so I'm going to give you something here. But you're going to have side effects. Maybe you're not going to breathe well, and maybe you're going to have some kind of weakness in your muscle. So these are side effects, but that's our goal, you see? But if we know that whatever neurotransmitter is here, which is different than this, then we could block this, and these won't have effect. So you're lowering the side effects of medication if you know the neurotransmitters and the receptors at each one of these spots. You could see where it goes into pharmacology with this. Okay? So sympathetic innervation, its effectors are target organs. Body wall is done by the spinal nerves, head and thorax by sympathetic nerves, and anything going into the abdominal cavity, we refer to them as the splanchnic nerves. The adrenal glands, again, it's broken down into two things. The inner core, we call the medulla, but the outer layer is called the cortex. The adrenal cortex is going to release 3 different hormones. Again, you'll learn about those in endocrinology and AMP2. But what we're going to concentrate on is the adrenal medulla, and that's going to be the inner core, and it's stimulated by preganglionic fibers that are going to release norepinephrine and epinephrine right into the bloodstream. So again, these are neurotransmitters because they're coming from a nerve, but since they go directly into the bloodstream, they're also referred to as hormones then. And the 2 hormones that come out, or the 2 neurotransmitters, whichever you want to talk about, are grouped together in a group called the catecholamines. And 85% is going to be epinephrine, and 15% will be norepinephrine. Okay? All right, the parasympathetic. Parasympathetic, as I told you before, they're coming from the brain and they're coming from the sacral area. So we sometimes refer to the parasympathetic nervous system as the cranial sacral division. It's rest and digest. Parasympathetic, paradise. Storing sleep, resting, eating, doing light activity, what you're doing there in your seats right now, curing your insomnia. Right? The neurotransmitters to the target organs will be acetylcholine. You see? You could almost guess about, well, geez, acetylcholine, didn't we learn about that with the skeletal muscle? Yeah. So you can see why you might have, you're going to block acetylcholine here for whatever parasympathetic is doing, you may have side effects with muscles. because that's where acetylcholine is also located. You got to start thinking that way for your future when you're going to be taking pharmacology about how to put the stuff together. Some functions of the parasympathetics, just some, it's going to do more or less the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. This will decrease the heart rate. You're resting. You don't need to have your heart pumping so hard. Your blood pressure goes down. This is where you're going to start digesting food. So your GI tract or your gastrointestinal tract will start squeezing food and pushing it forward and allowing digestion to occur. Your pupils will constrict. It also will prepare the body for sexual activity. Okay? The ganglia in the parasympathetic nervous system. We have terminal ganglia. They're located near or, like I said before, within the effector organ, whatever that target organ is. All the parasympathetic preganglion fibers will enter in this terminal ganglia, all of them. Cell bodies are located in the brain or the sacral areas of the spinal cord. So that's why we call it craniosacral division. The pons and medulla is where we have the cranial nerves nuclei located for at least 3, 7, 9, and 10. 3, 7, 9, and 10. Cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10 are the ones that are going to carry, or at least have, the cell bodies